Welcome to Raise Nation Radio, live from the Country Music Hall of Fame at the 8th Annual Raise Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Dawn Lego, and I could not be more excited about this year's conference. Over the next 2 days, we'll talk to fundraising leaders about the latest and greatest from the nonprofit world. We'll explore hot-button issues, innovative ideas, and bring you all the energy from the Music City. And joining me is my fantastic co-host, Matt Bitsagai from DonorDoc.
Thanks, Don. We are so excited to be here. We can't wait to share with you some innovative fundraising strategies, some inspiring stories. Buckle up, everyone, and get ready. We are about to raise the bar together. Welcome to Raise Nation Radio.
All right, Barbara, welcome to the podcast. Please take a minute to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Cindy. It's great to be here and to finally be able to meet you in person. I'm Barbara O'Reilly. I am founder and principal of Windmill Hill Consulting. We are based in the DC area, but we work with clients and nonprofits all over the U.S., working with them to give them the skills, the tools, and the mindset shifts that they need to be able to raise more money and keep more donors.
Amazing. Now, we're here at the Raise Conference, and so what better time than to talk about conferences as consultants? Do we go to them? Do we not? Do we only go when we're speaking? So I'd love to hear from your experience as someone who's been consulting for a while. How do you start to think about the business side or the business development side of conferences?
Yeah, so I think about it in two ways. So first, as a CFRE, I've got professional education requirements that I've got to maintain over the course of every 3 years in order to get recertified. So I have to think about that in terms of which conferences can I attend that will help to keep my saw sharpened and give me those professional credits. Yeah. And also, I'm a lifelong learner, so I love listening to other sessions and learning about what else is in the sector, seeing research that's been happening. I just stepped out of a mid-level session that was releasing a new report that came out about mid-level donors. And it's, there's so many, we have such benefit of being able to see research both in the sector and outside or sort of tangential to the sector that informs how we think about donors, how we think about our approaches. And frankly, we can learn from other sectors as well. Totally. So I love just sort of geeking out and learning about what else is out there that I can then bring back to our clients and change and maybe shape how we are thinking about our approaches and recommendations.
Awesome. So that's number one.
That's
and
number one.
Two?
Number two is I have to balance it with what else is in my schedule. Where is the best opportunity to be able to meet others, both professional, peers, and nonprofit leaders, and what's the travel requirements? So, I will attend conferences even if I'm not speaking. So ICON, for example, where we were just talking about up in Toronto this year, I did not speak, and that to me, I just love being able to be in community with so many others and learning. Yeah. So that is always kind of a must do. And then other conference, I really think about. Where is it? What's the time of year? Will I have an opportunity to speak? And if I don't, is the content enough in terms of the calendar, the schedule? Will I be able to then get, is it going to fit into my schedule? And I can still get that learning, to take away from that.
Now, in terms of speaking, because you have a lot of experience speaking.
I do.
Do you find that leads to business development, or does it have any direct tie to your ability to generate revenue for your business?
Yes and yes.
And if so, how? I was going to say. So I feel like people struggle with that. Like, how do you build in? Do you have a call to action? Do people come talk to you afterwards? How have you used it to really reinforce your business, or do you not, and just say like, I'm here to share good content?
So sometimes it's that, but many times it does lead to new clients that will reach out to us because they've heard me speak either in that moment or somebody else has heard me speak who then says, oh, you have to reach out to Barbara at Windmill Hill.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, it's when I ask people who reach out and say, I'd love to have a conversation, I'm always asking, like, how did you find us? Well, how did you hear about me? And many times it is because they've heard me speak somewhere or they saw something on LinkedIn because I'm very active on LinkedIn. So I'm always promoting webinars I'm on, podcasts I'm on, conferences I'm speaking at.
Yeah.
And so people will see that and they say, oh, right, okay, she talks about that, or she did a session on this topic. That piqued my curiosity. So it is a little bit of, it's part, they've heard me speak and they have a sense of who I am and what expertise and experiences I bring to bear, but it's also a validator in a way, because when they start to see, like on our website, they'll see where, some recordings of where webinars or conferences like this, where I've spoken, then it's sort of a validator.
Yeah. Okay, one of the things I was just talking to a friend about is the content that we create, because there's so much content in our sector, and so much of it, like, none of us are coming up with like the next new crazy big idea. Like fundraising is fundraising. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you can build efficiency in speaking by repurposing content or tweaking it and giving it longevity so that you can do more speaking without all of the work of creating like a brand new session each time.
Yeah, that's like the golden question, I feel like. And I do struggle with that because it's that balance of the workload and then being able of the sort of ongoing workload of our client work and then having the space to be creative and think, okay, what are the topics that I really want to speak about next? And then how do I build out those decks? Who might I partner with to be able to co-present? I would say donor retention is probably one of the biggest soapboxes that I talk about, and it comes through in every single presentation in some way, shape, or form. So that's kind of one of the anchor topics that I will draw from, and I've developed, when I first presented on it, I don't know, years ago, I've just taken that and tweaked that presentation. First of all, to update the numbers, which continue to go down, but that's a different conversation. But I create it and then I kind of adapt it and think about how it shows up in the sector. What else still needs to be addressed? What are those questions that keep popping up as people are seeing these numbers? So I would say that's one thing. I would say though, I do take inspiration from what I read and what I'm hearing other fundraisers talking about, or sometimes issues that I see coming up with our clients where I think, okay, this same topic, same friction, same barrier keeps coming up over and over again. This might be something that we think about as an actual topic to bring, for webinars or conferences. The challenge though is finding that time to then like sit with it and really think, okay, what actually are the key points I want to bring out? So I've got like a running list of ideas for new content, and only once in a while do I have that bandwidth to be able to like create something that I can start to, it's kind of like clay, right? You're molding it, and so I have a few other ideas that are in the works, but I start with just at least one topic that I can create that's new. Yeah.
When you think about the topics and what you want to share with the world and with our sector. I mean, you said your soapbox is stewardship, which I love because it should be everyone's. But do you, is that your soapbox because you see it as such an issue with your clients? Does it tie back directly to the work that you do? Or is it just sort of something that you find everyone just needs to know more of? So do you intentionally or unintentionally connect what you're talking about to warming up an audience to work with you?
So I would say donor retention is one of the biggest pain points in the sector, for sure. So that I feel like needs to, until it's fixed, until it improves, we can't stop talking about it. And so I think that is something that I just feel so passionate about, because if organizations, whether they're our clients or other organizations around in the sector, unless they are keeping more donors, they are going to stay stuck.
They're literally fundraising investments are like down the toilet.
Exactly.
Yeah,
for sure. They might as well keep the windows open and just throw the bills out the dollar bills out the window. And so I think that's one. But then another topic that I see so often, either in our own in organizations that we know or that I see across the sector, are around boards. And that's the topic that generally gets it's that lightning rod. It's the thing that people say, oh, that's a pain point for us. Yeah. And so when we do it on webinars, present that on webinars or in conferences, people are paying attention and they want to come and they want to listen and learn. And so those are two areas that have really that I've developed out over time, because they are still broken in our system, in our sector.
Yeah.
So.
Amazing.
Or maybe not completely broken. Maybe that's too negative. They're works in progress, I'll say.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yes, right. A lot of opportunity. Spoken like a consultant. Yeah.
Oh my God. Where was I? Just here, some conversation we were having here. Someone was joking. We were talking about like mansplaining, and someone was saying consultant-splaining.
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, I want to use that. So I guess we'll wrap up with two questions.
Yeah.
One is what's your pet peeve of consultant-splaining, where you find consultants in our sector just are constantly having to say something that's so obvious. It's come on, really? Do I have to say this again?
Oh my gosh. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that fundraising is an investment. It's not, it's a revenue center, whatever you want to say, but it's not, it's, if you invest in it and you do it well, then you will reap the results.
Yeah.
But if you feel like we don't have time, we don't have money to invest, then you get what you get, right? And so that is the thing I just see over and over. And and it is one of those, I can't believe I have to explain this correlation between, but it's something that pervades our sector. And truly, until nonprofit leaders like the CEOs and the executive directors and the boards understand that correlation, and if they're in the business side, they get it. They understand they're not cutting sales because that's going to generate revenue. Yeah. And that correlation to the nonprofit sector does not equate. And so that's the thing that I have to keep saying over and over again. And I am actually now at the point where I'm brutally honest with organizations.
Yes.
When
I love that.
Where I will say, okay, if you don't have an interest to grow, then you're going to get the same results. But this is what it's going to take. These are approximate costs, and we can forecast out based on, salary ranges or what we might recommend as suggested team structures. Yeah. But it is a long game, and I am often brutally honest with organizations now and saying, this is your reality, and if you choose to accept it, great, you will reap the rewards. Yes. If you don't, you're going to stay exactly where I found you.
Awesome. Okay, and the podcast I co-host with my friend Jess is called Confessions with Jess and Cindy. So I want to ask you for a confession about running a consulting business in the nonprofit sector. What's something you maybe wouldn't share elsewhere, or were reluctant to sort of take people behind the scenes of the business? Share your confession.
I don't have any. I don't have any.
Everything's an open book?
I'm going to be your most boring interviewee. No, I don't have any confessions.
Fair enough. I'm an open book, so I'm the same. I'm I literally share everything.
Yeah.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And
of course.
It was so great to meet you at this conference.
Likewise. Finally, we meet in person.
I know.
So.
Which is a benefit. I will add, one of the great things about conferences that I found is connecting with other consultants.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's the nice thing is that we see each other on social media for so long, and And then when you finally get to see somebody in person, face to face, either outside of what you see in their feed, or if you've been on Zooms with them or Teams or whatever it is, it's just really so nice then to be able to connect in a different way. So,
Totally. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
of course. Thanks, Cindy.
We are back at Raise Nation Radio, and we're super excited to be joined by Nathan Chappell of Donor Search and Fundraising AI. Nathan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. What a pleasure.
Yeah, we're sharing the stage later today, doing a panel. Maybe just tell our listeners like what that panel's about and what we're going to be talking about.
I think we're covering a lot on that panel. We have I think four panelists.
4 or 5,
yeah. And so we're talking about AI and the future of generosity, I think broadly. And I think each of us brings different lenses to what that means for their, the organizations that they work for, the organizations that they serve.
And you are instrumental in the fundraising AI. You guys have your conference coming up soon. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and kind of what the whole goal is with that?
Yeah, I guess for people who don't know, Fundraising AI is a passion project. It's an all volunteer movement of around 10,000 people in 100 countries. Obviously, the domain name is fundraising.ai, so pretty easy to remember. But its intention and purpose is to help educate people on the opportunities to use AI, but not in ways that will do harm to our sector. And so the premise of Fundraising AI is that, use AI to level up your organization, amplify your mission, but ensure that you do it in ways that promote and protect trust. And so I spend a lot of my time, most of my free time now, advocating for the responsible and beneficial use of AI. So that's what I'll be talking about later on today.
So can we dig into that a little bit? Yeah. So what are some examples when you're thinking about how can nonprofits use AI, ethically? Like, what are some of the examples of things that come to mind that, where you would be wanting to stay away from certain things that
the
you might do?
unethical side.
The unethical side, the side we don't want to go to.
Go to
the dark side.
The dark side really quickly. Yeah, one is, I think if we look at social media for just 1 second. So the idea of social media being, a community builder and an opportunity to bring people together was the intention. And that was, 10, 15 years ago, was this idea that we could use technology to bring people together. And we also had the benefit of looking at some of the adverse impacts that social media has had. So no one would say that social media is unethical, but has it been beneficial to society? And so in some ways it is, and in some ways it is not. So we see increases in anxiety and depression and decreases in happiness and all types of unintended consequences. And the premise around Fundraising AI is to basically say, look, let's be aware that while we can use AI to drive short-term revenue, and meaning I can produce more appeals, and actually they could be even probably better appeals, and I can follow certain cadences and sequences that align with human psychology, and but while we might drive short-term revenue that way, we might actually diminish trust if it looks like to the outside, to say a donor, that we're manipulating them. Mm-hmm. And, I became concerned about this around 2017, 2018, when I started working in AI, that, we could predict donor behavior much more accurately than we could have before. Now with generative AI on top of that, we can activate those predictions much faster. And so I think we're at a stage in society, and definitely in our career, where just because technology can allow us to do something, we have to hold ourselves accountable to this idea that maybe just because we can, doesn't mean we should.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's, where I see we could send a lot more emails and wouldn't be net beneficial, or we could replace humans with bots that look like humans that essentially manipulate people to give them money. And I think most people would agree that it's probably not a good idea. Mm-hmm. So that's just some of the examples. There's I don't think of AI in binary terms like good or bad. Sure. It's essentially, of course, a tool. And it's how we use the tool, and to ensure that it doesn't just help us short term, but that we promote and protect trust in our sector long term as well.
So you've promoted RAI and BAI, beneficial and responsible AI. And I love that, because I think we need some ground rules because AI, it has been, Matt and I have been talking to people all day, and it's been in every conversation. Right. So we know it's going to have a seat at the table. But if we can start off out of the gate being responsible, accountable,
Right.
and doing things that are beneficial, we will be a lot better off.
Yeah.
So to our audience that's listening, what are the top 3 things or top 2 things that they should do, and maybe the top 3 or top 2 things that they shouldn't do?
Well, that's a great question. And I'll just go back to this idea that RAI, responsible AI, that every private company talks about this. So Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they all talk about RAI. They declare it on their website, what that means. But I would say that for our sector that, operates in the currency of trust, that responsible AI and ethical AI is a minimum standard. So we added on beneficial to that. So you're like one of the first people I've ever quoted that. So that's amazing. Like, you just totally made my day. But this idea of beneficial AI.
I aspire to make your day, Nathan.
That's amazing. This beneficial AI is really looking out both at short term and long term. So that's awesome. On the how we use this, responsibly, one is, in fact, we have a study coming out on October 1st. So Cherry and Koshi and I, we just co-opted this study where we interviewed 1,000 donors. So people who had made gifts in the last 12 months, asking them what are their perceptions around nonprofits using AI. And not surprisingly, it came out very clear that donors want transparency. And while that means that a nonprofit needs to have governance, so some sort of document to say, we're going to use AI, but we're going to use it in a way that aligns with our values. So that's number one. Tip number one is like to form, so not just data governance, but an AI governance, and to make sure that that represents your organization's values, and even more, disclose that information, whether it's on a website or however, just to say, hey, we're thinking about how to use AI to improve your donor experience. And so at least there's some transparency, because that's what donors are really, seeking to do. And I think that, and then I think the probably third aspect of doing it responsibly is understanding that AI changes continuously. It's different than any other type of technology that it's not software like that operates the same way every time. AI evolves, which means that your AI governance needs to evolve. So it needs to be re-looked at. We look at ours every quarter. We update our framework every quarter to say what's changed in AI and does it still meet the needs of what it was intended for. So making it adaptive, this part of is just continual. Things, not to do would be removing humans from the loop.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I think that's a fear out there for sure.
Yeah. I mean, so tempting, right? I mean, when generative AI first came out, somebody came up to me and said, I fired 2 copywriters because I didn't like what they did. And I just copy and pasted, an appeal from ChatGPT. The problem with it is actually that appeal generated more revenue than any appeal he'd ever had. So the temptation is
you're on the right track.
It's just going to be like rinse and repeat and just like copy and paste. By removing humans, in the loop, we're going to do tremendous harm to our industry long term. And so, I mean, that's probably number 1, 2, and 3 of what not to do. And probably number 1, 2, and 3, just keep humans involved in the process of using AI to ensure that you're looking at things like, bias and ensuring that AI is representing your organization well, ensuring that you're being transparent around it. So, I think, I thought of this sentiment recently when we talk about autonomous fundraising. So autonomous fundraising is just basically bots raising money without humans involved at all. And, a bot can successfully, ask someone for money and do it probably more efficiently than a human. But there's a fine line between asking someone for a gift and manipulating someone to give. And a bot would not know the difference, because a bot just has a single goal, and the goal is to extract a gift from an individual, and it will take the most expedient, way to do that with the highest efficacy. And so that's why when you remove humans out of the loop, there's no checks and balances, and you can see how bad things happen very quickly in our industry.
Yeah, it's not replacing anyone or anything.
Right.
It's just about bringing more efficiency, more empowerment.
Acceleration,
Yeah, acceleration. Love that word.
Yeah. We it's been a theme actually in several of our conversations around the human piece not being lost.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real concern. I want to go back to something that you had touched on with, having your policies. And I think, it might be tempting for nonprofit organizations to just lean on the vendors that they're working with to have policies.
Yes.
But if I'm understanding what you're
Right.
saying, I think you're saying like each nonprofit should be thinking about having and adopting their own policy, regardless of what vendors they're working with. And
Yeah, each nonprofit and each individual in the nonprofit.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the greatest harms is listening, not just listening, it sounds bad, to say the big tech vendors that are talking about responsible AI. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they all have, they talk about a lot. And that's great. But, Volvo talks about their safety record of their cars, but it doesn't mean I can drive a Volvo recklessly and still be safe, right? It's my personal responsibility to ensure that, I am adhering to this tool and using it in a safe way. So I think it starts with organizations, one, adopting a policy for their own. And if they need help with one, fundraising.ai, we built the first framework for responsible AI. It lives on our website. You literally could put it in ChatGPT and say, align this with our corporate values, and it will do a really good job. It's not a complicated process, but it also goes to the need to educate everyone in your organization on their responsibility to ensure that you're prioritizing and protecting trust above all. And so that the
Which we need more of in our sector right now, for sure.
So much.
We can't lose any more of it.
Right. Yeah. So stakes are high, right? I
Right,
mean, our
of
sector
course.
is facing a lot of headwinds. And so, priority one is for organizations to adopt a framework and then also educate their team on like every person is a data steward, every person is an AI steward, to ensure that you're using it in a way that wouldn't mitigate harm, that is not going to do harm to our organization long term.
Responsibly.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot, unfortunately, there's a lot of naivety around in the users of these tools, that they don't always understand the implications of what they're giving for data to get back something. And so, making sure there's education within these organizations that, don't share private data with ChatGPT, those types of things. You're putting that data in there for it to take and use and learn on. So I think that makes a ton of sense. Where do you see, if you're trying to look out like 5 years?
You get this a lot, Nathan, I'm sure.
Where do you see things going from a fundraising technology and how AI is playing into that?
Yeah, I mean, well, AI it's considered an exponential technology. So again, humans have never encountered an exponential technology. It means that, it actually increases at a pace that we've never seen before. So AI trains AI, which is why advancements are happening faster than ever. That exponential nature, because we'll move into an age next year called agentive AI, and that means that AI will be allowed to create its own AI with certain parameters, but things will accelerate very quickly. So I think if we look at, from a macro perspective, decline in charitable participation on one side, so decline in number of people that give to charities, and this acceleration of technology, I think it will cause tension in organizations that will have to learn when and how to say no, which is not a discipline I think we've had a lot of in the nonprofit sector. So, it goes back to where we started. It's like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. The temptation for utility, the temptation to do something faster, more creatively, whatever, will be there. But I think unless we measure that against what is the trade-off between, or really making sure that we prioritize humanity over utility, I think is the biggest risk. So I would say that temptation will grow stronger and stronger, next year, the year after, the next year.
And those immediate results, that instant gratification.
Right. As the decline is happening, so there's this tension between like, oh, we're losing market share, so let's do something like, let's accelerate our work. And I think it's going to take a lot of discipline for our sector to really learn how to evaluate, when it's appropriate and not appropriate to use AI, and then be okay saying no in times that, if it feels like a shortcut, it's probably a shortcut.
It's probably, if it feels like a shortcut, it is. Well, that's why we're so grateful that we have Fundraising AI. Thank you for what you and, your cohorts are doing to really help us navigate, its use and deployment. And we want to be more efficient. We want to make those connections and trust, but we do need to look at that other side of the coin and be responsible with it as well.
And thanks for helping amplify that, because it's not a popular thing to say. or do. And it takes a little bit more rigor and discipline to be like, this stuff is exciting. And it's like, it's on
Sexy,
AI. It's
yeah.
super fun and it's exciting and all, and it changes. If you like change, it's time to be alive. If you don't, you're probably not feeling great right now. But for our sector to ensure that we mitigate harm, because nonprofits, by themselves are, they're satisfying their mission and they're amplifying their mission, but we're all connected. It's like, the roots of trees that are planted together. If, one tree is, in danger and others can send help and so, all that to say, if like Google or Amazon do something that is really bad, it will only affect their organization. Their stock price will go down, and then they'll have to deal
But we're
with that.
affecting communities. We're impacting the
All
world.
be impacted. So we all have this, I believe, a much higher degree of responsibility
for sure.
because of that connectedness. And so that's exciting and also challenging.
You've been a great voice for that too.
Thank
so
you.
I think you're helping us navigate that. I'm looking forward to your panel. I'm going to have to make sure
Yeah,
I
it's
get a
gonna be
seat
great.
there. It's
Yeah.
going to be great. Nathan, when is the summit? You have
October 1st. So
October 1st. Okay, very soon. And you also have a book. Before we close out, I just would like to give you a shout out. How can we get your book? What's the title of it? And
Awesome.
are we going to see another book soon?
there are 2 more books in the works. So
Okay.
yeah, actually, so my current book is The Generosity Crisis: A Case for Radical Connection to Solve Humanity's Greatest Challenges, which is a mouthful. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Audible,
All the places.
all where good books are sold, whatever. It's been an incredible thing to see how the sector's responded to what kind of is like the negative side of like, if we continue doing things the same way, the crystal ball is pretty clear. Like, let's stop doing
We're going to
that.
get the same results.
Yeah. So let's stop doing that and reimagine what, a new, different, more generous future looks like. Next book, actually, I had to flip it, writing a book called Nonprofit AI right now. And it's going to be how, not just for fundraising, but how nonprofits can use AI to amplify mission. And so all of the stuff, the pros and cons, the promise and peril, all of it together is kind of like a comprehensive field guide. Third book is called The Generosity Reboot, which is essentially going back to the generosity crisis, saying, based on our thousands of conversations that we've had since the book came out, what are those more tactical things that we can do to not just make incremental change, but radical change with an organization to like control, alt, delete, like we need to like which is the reboot. So all the computer nerds are going to love it.
I'm going to love it. I'm not a computer
Control,
nerd, but
delete,
I'm going to love it.
Yeah, let's zap the PRAM and all those things. So
I didn't have a little birdie tell me that there was going to be a book 2 or 3. I just had a hunch,
That's
so I
awesome.
knew I would ask.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm so glad we talked about that.
And fundraising.ai is just fundraising.ai. The summit is entirely free. It's an incredible community. And so sign up. We have amazing speakers. It's one full day, October 1st, and we have 34 presenters that are just phenomenal.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for leading the charge. I feel like Matt and I, we were hearing the same conversation. AI in fundraising is definitely the talk of Raise.
Awesome.
So thanks for being here and continuing that conversation.
Great. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Judy and Koshi of Kindsight, welcome to the studio. You and I got to have fun on a panel yesterday here at the Raise conference, talking about future trends in fundraising. One of the things we chatted about yesterday were DAFs. Can you talk to us just big picture for our listeners, getting a quick snapshot? What is the opportunity right now around donor advised funds?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Thank you both for being here. This is great. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think a lot of people are talking about DAFs right now.
Yeah.
Donor advised funds have been around for quite some time, actually. But right now, I think the studies indicate there's about $250 billion that are being held in donor advised funds right now.
Wow.
So imagine distributing 10% of that, or even if it's smaller than that, into nonprofits. It has a huge impact on the overall giving that would occur. I think by last total of the Giving Institute is $557 billion. So you can kind of do the math and know that there's a lot of potential that could be impacting nonprofits. And I don't want to create the false dilemma that they're locked up and we need to figure out how to unlock them.
Right.
I don't think that's exactly right. But this is, I think Mitch Stein had a great example or great analogy of donor advised funds, that they're like gift cards. So you know that they're going to give to a nonprofit at some point, and it really is just a question of when and how they want that to redeem that gift card. But they have all of the intention of doing so. I think nonprofits, particularly fundraisers, including myself, when I was dealing with donor advised funds, we just didn't know what we were dealing with. We didn't really understand why donors would give this way. Some of us are fundraising old enough to remember we were only dealing with checks and then like credit cards and crypto and Apple Pay and all the other things, right? So it just seems like a lot, and donor advised funds is another one of those options that seems more complicated than it really is.
Yeah. I want to ask a follow-up to it, because I think that often, in the nonprofit sector, which leads into the next question as well, shiny is like the thing, right?
Yes.
And so I do hear DAFs resurfacing as a conversation point, and sort of that shiny for particular organizations. In talking to donors around this point, what's the opportunity for connection for them in building that relationship and what that looks like?
That's a great question. I think part of it is realizing that there is philanthropic intention on the part of these donors. That's why they opened a donor advised fund.
Right.
I was once working on a capital campaign for the organization I was working with, and we're talking about all of these creative ways for this person to make a gift to our organization by selling us the land that we needed to develop. And we could do it in some creative ways that would be tax advantageous, and a donor advised fund was one of those options. He was not philanthropic at all. He had no interest in giving at all. So none of the strategies that I was talking about were landing at all.
Right.
And so as you think about the messaging component, it's knowing where the donor is, meeting them where they are with the intention of generosity, but not necessarily the explicit plan for what that looks like.
Yeah.
And so if you've ever read StoryBrand by Don Miller, it really is just being the guide, right?
Yeah.
And saying, here's the plan to unleash that generosity. And whether it's a 3-step plan or whatever it might be, it's showing them the path to being who they really truly want to be with themselves and this pot of assets that they can give from.
Well, and the philanthropic intent, I think, is super important. They also sometimes don't have the plan. They actually think the DAF is the plan, right? Based on their sort of investment strategy or planners and people who are telling them like, great, you're at this phase. Now let's introduce the DAF into your plan. And so I think the relationship at the core of that and trying to figure out what their personal mission is with their philanthropy becomes really crucial there, whether it's happening right now or later.
Yes.
I want to shift gears a little bit because I want to make sure we have time to dive into AI.
Okay. Can I just touch on that because it's so
Yeah.
smart? And I just want to say, so I have a CAP certification, chartered advisor in philanthropy. And one of the things that we talk about is how to help donors understand their plan.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're very responsive to just being able to grab, like someone comes to their door and says, will you give money? Or they respond to an email or something like that. And how do we help them to think about their mission statement, their legacy?
Yeah.
And instead of doing sort of peanut butter philanthropy, where they're giving to a
That's
lot
a
of things and
great
spreading
analogy.
it thin, to
Yeah.
kind of think about it from a very intentional perspective about what are the things that really align with their values and their personal or family mission.
Yeah. It's so important. Okay. AI.
Yeah.
So I say that.
I've heard of
and
it.
I know. It's
You know a
it's-
thing or two about it.
It's here. It's happening. Again, shiny thing. I think sometimes our nonprofit friends are like, oh my gosh, here's this thing. I have to use it. What is that? What do I do? I don't know. It scares me. There's a lot of information and pieces on it. Where do you see AI actually impacting the nonprofit sector the most?
Well, first and foremost, I think we need to recognize that we're all using or beholden to AI in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So if you're doing any sort of digital fundraising, if you have a website, algorithms are at play on social media, algorithms are at play at search engine optimization levels. Gary
Netflix
Kasparov,
viewing, our
Netflix is a
shopping.
great example.
Yeah.
Amazon's a great example. But Gary Kasparov lost to IBM, not IBM, but to Blue something in the 90s. And Ken Jennings, my hero, lost to IBM Watson on Jeopardy 20 years ago or something. I mean, it was a long, 10, 15 years ago, but it was a long time ago. So it's impacting everything that we do. And as Sean said on the panel yesterday, it's sort of under the surface. We don't necessarily see it, but it's playing a part in the tools that we use every day. It's now just sort of becoming this extra tool that's on the side that's creating that shiny new object syndrome. And so as we're navigating that space, it's really about looking at it as a new and additional opportunity. I'm not suggesting that you really need to grab onto another new tool. Maybe you do, maybe it would be helpful. But for a lot of organizations, it's about rethinking what is our process? What is the way in which we engage with our stakeholders, whether they're donors or volunteers or community members, in a more relevant way? In a way that reaches them where they are with the stories that they want to hear at the right time. And I think, that panel was a great example too of where Nathan was talking about precision philanthropy. We've been in spray and pray mode for a really long time. And we don't have to be. And I think the business world has learned that they don't have to be, and they're optimizing by using some of these tools. But I don't want anyone to come away from, whether it's the product that I built or just the AI discussion whatsoever, that you have to use AI.
Right.
You need to know that it's out there, but you probably already do. And then look at what your human potential is inside of your organization, and what are the things that don't bring people joy? What are the things that drive people up the wall? For me...
Or out of your organization.
That's right, exactly. And for me, that was responding to the same question over and over again. How can AI do that response? So that, if you're looking at gift acceptance policies or gift entry, how do we enter a donor advised fund into our CRM? Do I, as a person, need to answer that question? Absolutely not.
Right.
The robot can answer that question for you faster and better.
Right.
And there are lots of places in our lives where we go out of our way to avoid human contact on some things. Like, we don't want a gas station attendant anymore. We want to pump our gas and get going. Right? Or unless we have to, we don't want to have to deal with a person to check our bags at the airport.
Right.
We just want to have it done. Very few people use the SkyCap anymore, right?
So
these still existed.
So there are all these types of instances where we recognize humans aren't the best in those circumstances. And then there's lots of instances where we want a human there if we have an extra question or we need a little bit of help. I think phone companies are a great example of that. Like, I'm on T-Mobile, and if I have a problem with my phone, I want to be able to go into a T-Mobile store. But I don't go there to buy a phone. Like, I just bought a Pixel 9, and I just bought it online. I don't need to talk to anybody. I don't need a demo. I don't need a sales pitch. I just bought it. Right.
Well, I think so much of fundraising is about relationship building. And what we're talking about right now is how I use AI most is task management.
Yes.
Is it possible for AI to also help us with relationships?
I think to a certain extent it is. I would say that it's very good to use it for things like task management, right? I was sharing the example of being able to build an ICS file to upload to Google Calendar a few minutes ago. You can easily do that for board meetings, for example, and then you're not sending your board members a list of dates to hold on their calendar. You can send them calendar invites for all of them in one fell swoop. And that's just a pain.
So I want you to actually break that down for the listener that doesn't know anything about technology. You just said ICS.
Yes.
So you had a list of 14 dates of your kid's schedule that you needed on your calendar. And you were able to ask AI to create a file. I don't even need to know what the ICS means. And that then populated your calendar for you, so you didn't have to spend the time populating the calendar.
So I got the email. It had all of these dates for the Den meetings. And I was like, am I going to sit and put each one of these into my calendar? I just copy pasted it into Claude and I said, create an ICS file for this. I didn't have to do anything. ICS is the calendar file that Google Calendar and iCal. So iCal can use that same format. So I just said, just create an ICS file of all these dates and this time and whatever. And it created the file. And then I downloaded the file from Claude, uploaded it to Google, and I was done. It was a minute.
That's amazing.
I've had it create. So Nathan Chappelle and I did a survey of 1,006 donors on donors to nonprofits in the last 12 months. Completed the survey in August. We produced a 70, 80-page report on donor perceptions of nonprofits using AI. First of its kind. Directly from the words from the mouths of donors. And it's coming out October 1st during the Fundraising AI Summit. So if people haven't signed up for that, they should. But point being, we built the report based on that, and then I uploaded the report to Claude, and I said I want a landing page for this, and it built the landing page with graphs, with text, put all of that together, and I just said that simply. Like, there's no complex prompt engineering. It was just build a website, write this file, and those are places where I think it's just super easy, super low risk to do some of those things. When it comes to relationship management, that's where I get a little bit more nervous,
Right.
Samantha, honestly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like, I think there are things that I need to remember about you, and can AI help surface that at the right time?
Right.
Maybe. But when it comes to taking over any part of the relationship building, I don't want to talk to an avatar.
Right. Then
of
we're removing
Samantha
the
or
human
Kristen.
element.
I want to talk to Samantha.
Right.
Like, that's the point. And no
Right.
matter how good AI gets at, and it's not there yet in terms of compute time, no matter how good it gets at empathy and reaction time, it's still not the same as interacting with a human. And that's where I start to get nervous about what for-profit markets will do.
Yeah.
When we
Yeah.
have AI romantic relationships
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now, and I'm worried about what that means for society.
Yeah.
More than I'm worried about what happens in the fundraising space.
Well, and what's interesting too is that the pieces you're naming as potential for AI, I look at and go, wow, what that actually does is open up my bandwidth
That's exactly right.
to be in relationship, because I think we get peanut butter donors because we're doing spray and pray,
Yes.
right? And a lot of that for our fearless fundraisers is specifically a result of lack of time. So if AI can become a tool to make time for
Yeah.
me as a fundraiser to focus on the thing I'm good at, the thing I want to do at, and the human connection that we all know is what
Yeah.
drives that mission work, that becomes me using the tool for good,
Right.
versus it
Yeah.
supplanting something that really is going to be offensive or non-engaging to donors.
Exactly. I mean, you all are in the event space and you are so good at it. And there are all kinds of things that you do in advance to prepare
Yeah.
for a great event. And there are some of those ticky-tacky things that AI can handle that a human does not need to
Yeah.
handle, right? Like, if we're going to send a follow-up mail piece or email, we've
Yeah.
got a lot of that pre-loaded, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're not
You bet.
starting it the day after.
Right. Right.
Even though it's coming
Oh,
out the day after.
sometimes.
Well, ideally,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Like,
ideally, yeah.
ideally, you have some of the bones of those pieces and the plan for that put together. Now, I think we have the opportunity to say, like, we know that Kristen showed up at the event, and we can pull that into AI and then have a draft of something
Yep.
ready to go immediately after the event. Even,
Yeah.
something, the example that you gave, Samantha, on the panel, like, we can do routing of delivery of auction items.
Yeah.
Like, no human needs to sit down with a literal map
right.
and figure that out.
Correct.
Right.
So these are great examples of where it does, to your point, really free us up to do more
Yep.
of the relationship building, because I'm not wasting minutes or hours or days doing some of the stuff that just does not need to be done by
Or
humans.
pieces of my soul.
Yes.
Right? Like, there's a
For
fatigue
sure.
that happens with those that makes us unable to be present sometimes.
Yes.
Before you
Yeah.
jump ahead, I have one follow-up question to that, which is just for a novice nonprofit who has never approached AI in their awareness of, like, I'm going to use this tool intentionally. Do you have a recommendation of the tool that would be?
I mean, I don't. I think a lot of people are looking at all the different tools and feeling a lot of overwhelm. Some of them are free, some of them are cheap. Pick the one that suits you best, maybe one that already works within your system. And what I would say is, when you're exploring, explore with very low risk, non-donor facing options.
Right.
Things like, can I load up our employee manual into into ChatGPT, for example, or into Gemini, and ask it questions so that the staff
Yep.
can figure out, like, how many vacation days they have.
Right.
Yep.
Like, those are super low risk. You're not creating any problems with PII, personal identifiable information. You're not, putting anything out there that's community facing. Really, really straightforward. The other thing that I would experiment with, things like in Microsoft Copilot, which is probably in some tools that people are using,
Yep.
or in Gemini. If you have a plan to do something, maybe it's like an event checklist or something like that, or you just load it up and ask, what are some other things that we could do? What are some
Interesting.
surprise
Yeah.
and delight
Yeah.
things? It helps you, and maybe you don't take any of those suggestions, but maybe that spurs some additional
Brainstorming's not
thought.
bad.
Exactly.
Yeah. Chirian, I could listen to you all day because
too.
you do this really great job of bringing these big theoretical ideas into really practical places and demystifying them. So thank you so much for being with us today on the
It's
Raise
such
Nation
a pleasure.
broadcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Well, Fearless Fundraisers, that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for joining and listening in. I want to thank my fantastic co-host, Matt Vitsagai, as well as all of the podcasters, Taylor Shanklin, Kristen Steele, Samantha Swaim, and Cindy Wagman. We couldn't do it without you, and we also couldn't do it without all of our amazing guests who shared their inspiration with all of you today.
Absolutely, Don. And also a special thank you to our friends from Utopia for their behind-the-scenes support and production. Make sure to tune in for all of the Raise 2024 episodes so you don't miss out on any of this amazing content.
Yeah, we don't want to miss a single episode. That is a wrap. Thanks for joining us for this amazing Raise experience.
I'm Matt Vitsagai.
I'm Dawn Lego.
Stay fearless.